Yeah, this movie penetrated my insides and made everything blink like Christmas lights until I exploded. And now insert that reference clip right here.
The boss said he'd make the voices go away. He said he'd go inside and replace them with bright lights. Like Christmas.
Hey there guys, how are you? I'm sorry for the delay on this video. I was actually on a trip to the Nevada desert, staying at a real creepy place called the Clown Motel. So yeah, look out for that video in the next few weeks. I promise you, you will be terrified. Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, goes down a descent of madness to become the Joker. Now let's talk about Joker, and where do I start with this one? This is one of those films that's rare, especially when it comes to the comic book genre of films, because in this movie, when you're watching it, you really feel like the artist, Todd Phillips, who also wrote and directed this film, he got to make the movie that he originally envisioned. And that doesn't happen too often. This feels more like a film than a product or just part of a universe to tie things together just to get to the next movie. This movie is written and directed by Todd Phillips, who's mostly known for directing comedy movies. Some of those are really good, and some of those are Hangover 3. And after watching this movie, it shows how much range Todd Phillips has as a director and writer, and coming from a comedy background, it really helped elevate this film because it contains a lot of dark humor. And that was one of my favorite aspects about this film, was the dark humor, because I'm a dark, twisted psychopath myself, a little bit morbid, and I do things late at night that I don't ever want to tell you about, and you don't want to know because it will haunt your dreams. If you've been watching my videos for years now, you might know that Nightcrawler and American Psycho are two of my favorite films of all time. And they're sort of similar to Joker in a few ways, especially with the dark comedy and sociopathic tones. But the thing all three of these movies have in common, they have villainous characters, but they're likable, they're charismatic, and in some way, you almost relate to them, and they share their inner thoughts throughout the entire film. And I love that. I love that aspect and that vibe. And Joker does that. And that's one of those things that really connected with me. And it was the movie that I wanted it to be, because we don't get enough movies like this nowadays. I want more movies like Nightcrawler or American Psycho or Joker. So yeah, Hollywood, keep making more shit like this. I'm a weirdo and I like it. And I relate to it. Don't judge me. And much like the two movies I just mentioned, this is a true character study. This is a deep dive into the character of Arthur Fleck's psychosis. And it's almost unsettling at times. It's confusing. The movie's ambiguous, and it gives you many options along the way. Every different plot point along in the movie, you have two options. You can go this route or you can go this route. Because keep in mind, the character of the Joker is a delusional lunatic, so you never really know what's reality and what's not. Because he doesn't either. And much like the Joker's origin story, there's no definite answer depending on which comic book storyline you want to take into account, and that's what I really enjoyed. We didn't need to see Joaquin Phoenix falling into a vat of acid. For me, this is the interpretation of the origin story I much prefer. It's much more compelling, and it's a slow burn into why the character of Arthur Fleck becomes the Joker. And it makes sense. Or as much sense as an insane lunatic who's a sociopath can have, but for me, it all culminated and I felt really fulfilled by the end of the movie. Now let's really talk about Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Joker, aka Arthur Fleck, and he's a kooky guy. He's a little bit bizarre. If you ever watched an interview with Joaquin Phoenix, well, he's a little bit difficult, I guess, to talk to. And I don't think there's a better actor that could have portrayed this version of Joker better than Joaquin Phoenix did. His character throughout this film has a very subtle approach to things, but he's completely zany and over the top, and it has a lot of dark comedy moments and a lot of emotional moments, and he freaks out and rages out throughout the movie, and there's so many different emotions blended together, but they're all timed perfectly, and he never overdoes any one of them. And some of the little understated things that play into maybe the comedy aspect of the movie, it's still funny, but it's also creepy and demented at the same time. And that it's like the perfect culmination of everything coming together. And with that said, there's a debate to be had. Whose Joker's better? Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight or Joaquin Phoenix's Joker from Joker? But here's the thing. I refuse to compare both characters. I can't do it. I won't do it. Because for each incarnation, each movie that character was in, you couldn't reverse the roles and get the same performance. Now let's talk about how this film looks and the cinematography. Visually, this movie doesn't look like your standard comic book movie with a very glossy tone and CG explosions every 12 minutes. And don't get me wrong, I love things like that. I watched Avengers Endgame 3 times on a flight just the other week when I went to Nevada. I flew there, I watched it once, there was nothing good on, so I watched it again on the way back. I don't mind over-the-top comic book movies. I love them. But as far as the look and tone of this film goes, it's dirty and gritty at times, and it looks like films like Taxi Driver from the late 1970s. And this film does take place in Gotham City in the early 1980s, and it's very reminiscent to how real-life New York was in the 1970s and the 1980s. And I loved how they used real-world events in this film that actually happened in New York in the 1980s, like the trash strike. But let's be honest, this film looks identical to Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. It's heavily influenced in every way, including multiple plot points, ideas, themes, and once again, the look of the film. And that wasn't really a surprise for me because I remember watching the first trailer for Joker almost a year ago and thinking to myself when I was watching it, oh, that sort of has like a Taxi Driver vibe. Now I know the creators behind Joker said that they were influenced by Martin Scorsese's work, such as King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, and that's great to be influenced and use that as a reference point. But this film, Joker, it feels like it borrows the blueprints and just fills in the gaps with some different stuff along the way. And I'll save a lot of those comparisons for my spoiler video because there's just way too many to dive into depth right here. But if you've never seen Taxi Driver and you watch Joker, it'll blow your mind. You will think it's the most original thing you've ever seen. But if you've seen the film Taxi Driver, like I have multiple times, and you watch the film Joker, you can sort of almost guess where the movie's going to go, all the way until the end of the film, where you think to yourself, that's almost too similar. Why did you do that? But the other part of me doesn't really give a shit because I loved this movie. I loved everything about this movie. And if you're going to borrow from a movie, Taxi Driver is a great one to borrow from. And with all that said, that's really my one and only complaint with the film Joker. It borrows a little too much from previous films like Taxi Driver. And one other thing about the movie I really enjoyed, there's a major subplot revolving around Thomas Wayne and the Wayne family, because going into this, I thought it was just going to be a very secluded Joker story and almost too afraid to mention other characters that relate to Joker, so that was a pleasant surprise. Now, here are my final flicking thoughts on Joker. I have to mention this before I go. When it comes to all the controversy surrounding this movie before it came out, it was stupid. I hated every second of it. It was just news articles and headlines so people would click shitty websites. In the grand scheme of things, when you compare the violence in this film that goes down to violence in other films, even violence like in the film American Psycho or Taxi Driver, or even Logan. Did you guys watch the trailer for Logan? Do you remember this shit? He just stabs his claws through a guy's skull. But the Joker in this movie shoots a few people and everyone loses their minds. Here's my profound thought of the day. Art doesn't inspire violence. Violence inspires art. Joker is probably one of the best comic book origin films I've ever seen, and that's coming from a guy who's watched Batman Begins 7,892 times. But I truly felt like by the end of this movie, I understood his motivations, his reasons. The movie presents all these different options, and it's almost like you're inside of the character's head throughout the entire movie. And that was amazing. I'm going to give Joker an A. If the film Taxi Driver never existed, I would easily give this movie an A+. But I really enjoyed this movie. It was so immersive and fulfilling and ambiguous, and it didn't spoon-feed the audience every single answer. You had to decide things on your own, and it was nice to think once again when you go see a movie. That's my thoughts on the movie Joker. Now here's my question for you, and let me know down below. What did you think about the movie? Or what is your favorite movie with a psychotic character in it? And by the way, before I go, you see those posters over there on the wall? No, the one to the right. Yeah, you know what poster that is? That's Taxi Driver. Hang on. I was sort of doing a reenactment from the scene Taxi Driver where Martin Scorsese's in the back of the cab. Anyway, great scene, very dark. Yeah, but these are display posters. Display posters are better than normal posters because you can hang them on your wall with just a magnet. And the coolest thing is the posters are made out of metal, so they last forever. And they just look awesome. Look at that. And here's the Joker poster I had hanging back there. But there's thousands of different designs at display.com, different sizes. I highly recommend them. And if you guys want to help support my channel, which would be a big help because YouTube hates me, you guys can save 25% off any display design by using the promo code JOKER25. That's a special promo code just for you guys. So if you guys want some awesome posters based on movies or just any design you can think of, definitely check out display.com. I highly recommend it. I have like 25 of these things. So yeah, check it out down below. And one more thing before I go. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Look out for a podcast this week talking all about the movie Joker on my magical and mystical Patreon exclusive podcast, Flickbuster. So check it out. As always, guys, make sure to put on a happy face and subscribe.